We are honored to have our partners at HPE present the entire Smart Bytes series. HPE is the official data insights partner of EG and is working with our coaching staff to create AI and machine learning tools to analyze gameplay and evolve team strategy. We've worked with them to show our fans more data and insights, and their logo is proudly worn on the shoulder of our player jerseys. Stay tuned for a lot of more exciting things from our partnership with HPE, but for now, let's introduce our three special guests today. So we have Soham Chowdhury, aka Valens, the director of CSGO. We have Michael Skriloff, aka Biora, a League of Legends analyst, and Juan Borges, aka Hepa, our CSGO strategic coach. So welcome everyone. We're super excited to have you all here. So let's start off with some introductions. Biora, would you want to kick us off with your title and a summary of your job?
Yeah, hi. My name is Biora. I am a League of Legends analyst, so data analyst, also some scouting analytics. Um, yeah, I mainly work on things from scouting reports to general data insights, building tools for the team, making sure that our coaching staff and players have everything they need to be competitive.
Awesome. So Hepa, I want to turn it to you now. Do you mind giving us your title and just a brief summary of your role here? I think you're muted, Hepa, maybe?
Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
So, um, yeah, my name is Juan. I'm one of the CS:GO strategic coaches right now, and let's say that my role inside EG right now is to be a bridge between the data science team and all of the teams. We're actually developing some tools for the teams to use and help them to perform in a better way.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure we will dig into that interesting stuff later. So Valens, I want to throw it to you now. Do you mind introducing yourself and just giving as brief a summary as you can of your very big job?
Tell
Wh-
us.
What's up, everyone? Thanks, Mel. I'm Soham. I'm Valens. I lead our Counter Strike program. Official title: Director of Athletics. Day to day, it's everything from general management. You know what you might find to player contracts, negotiate, make sure the rosters are functioning well, all the way to working with our data science teams and our executive team as well to make sure that our strategy for how many teams we should have, which players we should get, is on point moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about how you found your way into your current positions. So Valens, would you mind sharing a bit more about your background and kind of how you were led to EG?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep this relatively short, but to me, my goal for a long time is kind of bridging my data science and engineering passion with esports, competitive gaming, and it kind of started as a professional player for me when it comes to the esports side of things. Obviously, I didn't start as a pro; I'm not that good, but eventually became a pro. And I was done with college at that point. I was working at Tesla, did my whole electrical engineering degree, so I had this background in engineering, but also just had a passion for Counter Strike and in general competitive gaming. And I wanted to bridge the two things. So I think that's where, fast forward some pro playing, some pro coaching, and talked with Nicole, our CEO at EG, and wanted to make something happen where we're actually developing esports analytics and how do we actually use data in a meaningful way. And here we are since late 2019, almost 4 years, which is crazy.
Wow. Yeah, I can't believe that. So obviously the esports ecosystem industry is a pretty large one. There are a lot of players in the space. So I'm curious as to what stood out about EG specifically that made you interested in joining EG.
A really big part of it was this is again late 2019, and there was a lot of partners, potentially, software partners, tech partners coming into the space. It was booming, and a lot of kind of partners wanted to focus on one specific game or maybe just kind of get their agenda through. But what I really liked about EG and the partners we brought on board is we could focus on a lot of games and being kind of game agnostic with what we we're creating with our tools, and in general it's going to be a multi-year thing. And here we are 4 years deep, right? Of course, I transitioned from the data science aspect to leading the Counter Strike team,
And
but
we
still,
miss you every day. Please come back.
I really wish I could. No, of course I miss you too, Mike. No, but honestly, 4 years deep, and we have our data science innovation team going strong. And to me, I think that's what I wish for back in 2019. And here we are. Super excited about that.
Yeah, that's a great story. So Biora, you mind sharing a bit about, your path to EG and what that looked like?
Yeah, I actually started kind of opposite of like tech and stuff. I was a music teacher for a long time, but then like when COVID hit, I started digging more into video games. I was a coach for better part of a year, working up from like coaching, like platinum diamond squads to like diamond masters, masters, grandmasters, and then up to challenger, and then worked on my like analytics portfolio. Got picked up by CLG and then worked there for a year. And then after that, yeah, I found myself at EG.
That's awesome. That's interesting to hear too, because I'm a hard stuck bronze, and you've not offered to coach me or carry me into diamond. So I'll wait on that.
I will not be carrying anyone to diamond, I promise you.
All right, Hepa, do you mind just sharing a bit about your background and how you came to EG as well?
Yeah. So I'm not muted, right? I'm joking.
No,
No,
no.
you're good.
So,
You're good.
so I actually did something that I would not recommend as I dropped out of the university because I had an opportunity in esports. I actually started as a coach in a CS:GO academy team back in Spain. 1 year later, they actually promoted me to the first team, but as an analyst. So from there on, I actually got into better teams and organizations with time. I got into Movistar Riders, then into Team Liquid, and now into EG. And yeah, that's my path.
Wonderful. When you were studying in university, was it data related at all, or esports was just calling your name and you're like, I'm going into
No,
data and esports?
I was actually studying to be a doctor, so it was not related
Oh,
in a way.
wow.
Very
Wow,
cool.
that's amazing. I had no idea.
If it makes you feel more among your peers, I also dropped out of university, so
So
do
did
not feel
I.
do
Look
not
at
feel
us.
alone.
Look at
Look at this now.
us.
Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought?
I should have
Right,
dropped
Soham?
out.
I'm sure you did too, right,
I
Soham?
should have dropped out. I mean,
This is not professional advice. We are not giving professional advice. This is a disclaimer. No one here is giving that as professional advice. Thank you. We will not be sued for this.
Thank you. Thank you, Biora. All right. Well, do you mind, Biora, sharing just a bit more of your experience when it comes to breaking into the esports industry as an analytics professional?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest advice that I can give to anyone who wants to is build your portfolio. I've said this a lot on my personal streams, and I've talked about it a few times. I haven't really talked about it in a while, but just to bring it back up, like the best strength you have as an analyst is the fact that your work speaks for itself. You can create, scripts, spreadsheets, etc., and you can, show that to people as long as it's obviously not compromising the team that you're working with or whatever. So be it, right? You have that at your disposal. So show your work, like put it together, make a nice portfolio, make sure that people can access it easily, maybe create a simple website for yourself to showcase it and just show people, make sure that people know what you do, because a lot of people don't understand what the job of an analyst is. So the first thing is making them see like, oh, this is what I can provide. Here you go. You want to know? Here it is.
It's awesome. I have two follow-ups to that, I guess.
Sure.
The first one is just more curious if there were any challenges that you faced when you were, entering this field, and like how did you overcome them to sort of establish yourself as like an analytics person?
um I mean, so Zero's kind of mentioning it in chat. When you are not in the tier 1 scene or tier 2 in NA, I don't know if all tier 2 scenes have access. You don't get access to base data. The biggest challenge right now for analysts coming in is that a lot of teams want someone who already knows how to use it, I would say. So if you can, tried to find a way to work with maybe a lower tier team like an academy team, or I don't know if all LCL or NACL teams get access to it right now. I don't know the full specifics, but try to find a team that will bring you on as an analyst so you can start practicing with base data, because it's huge if you can get into coding and making sure that you can work with that data, manipulate it, and create insights from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you've touched on the fact that you've come from like a non-traditional background. You didn't start in analytics, you didn't start in data. So I'm curious when it comes to like programming languages, what do we at EG use? What does the data science team use? And then like if you have any suggestions as what you would suggest people get into and try to learn if they're interested in this field, what would
Oh,
those be?
Python and SQL for sure. Those are the two biggest. I would assume most people work in Python in this field. I don't think there's much of a reason not to. I mean, if you're going into like, web dev for like web apps, then it's a little different. But yeah, mostly just Python and SQL are going to be the biggest ones.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm gonna chime in too, Mel, if you don't mind, because
Oh,
I really think
absolutely.
that something we can't overlook is just traditional Excel, Google Sheets also, because
True. That's a
you
good point. Yeah.
you wouldn't believe how many teams and players all they need is a simple output like that, and
Yeah,
that's
that's
helpful
fair.
enough.
It's very valid.
So, just be mindful about not trying to use a hammer for every single job.
Yeah.
Sometimes the easiest solution is the best one, and you get going quicker.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious now, how important is like data visualization as a skill in this field? Because I know myself, like in my role, which is not data, a big part of, the job is learning how to communicate to different parties. So how does that play into, the data science team and how you provide insights to players and coaches who might not know
It's
how to interpret, a data set?
I think I had a very strong opinion coming into this field, and I still stand by it, which is that data visualization is equally, if not in esports, almost more important than your actual raw technical skill set. Um, because, like you said, like most people don't or most people are not used to looking at data or spreadsheets, etc. They don't want to log into Tableau. They don't want to log into these high-powered data websites. Like they just want to see something simple and easy that they can understand. And so being able to create those visualizations, not just from a perspective of like a data visualization, like what people would learn in university, like different types of like classic visualization models. Like I'm talking like creating nice visual presentations just as a visual almost art form, like being able to understand how to convey information in a way that is compositionally nice to look at, that can be digested, easy to play with. That's kind of one of the biggest skill sets that I think is easy to develop if you're coming into the scene, because it requires no technical knowledge. It just requires you playing around with what you see and creating something that looks good to you, what you think looks good. I think it's really important.
Yeah, so I heard you touch on Tableau. So now I'm just curious, and this is for the group. What kind of data visualization tools do you guys use as a team, or do you develop your own tools and applications?
I don't know if you have a different answer on this, Soham, but realistically for me, as far as visualization goes, you got to keep in mind that I'm showing data to our coaching staff who are not going to like Tableau is not for everyone, and it takes a while to even learn how to navigate Tableau. Um, and I'm not going to put that on them. Like I'll just make a presentation. If I need to make something that's like more complex, like I'll just put it together in Photoshop. But otherwise, there are certain packages you can install in Python that'll give you pretty nice outputs that you can just take a screenshot of most of the time. If they need to dive deeper, like usually they don't, but if they need to, I'll make a spreadsheet and it'll be interactive and they can play around with it so they can change the numbers or do what they need to do. Or we also have web apps that they can play around with too for certain things.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Peppa, I want to turn it to you now. Um, so what led you to pursue your career in esports analytics? I know you mentioned kind of your background and how you had gone from player to analyst. But I'm just curious if there's any other specific steps that you had taken to enter the field. We touched on your educational background a little bit, and I'm sure there is some marriage of skill and knowledge in like medicine and that route, and then analytics. So I'm curious if you found anything particularly beneficial in that journey.
Yeah. I actually want to add one thing about what Mike said, and is that data, at least in CSGO, is a new thing, or it is not really used that much. So actually giving like a huge spreadsheet, Google Doc to the coaching staff is, let's gonna say that it is difficult to work with
Yeah, 100%.
because it's a
Yeah.
lot of data and they are not
Yep.
used to it. And if you can make it really easy and really visual, you will actually help help them a lot, even though if it is not really if you don't go really deep into it. And about your other question, I just found that the like CS:GO, like the theory of CS:GO was really interesting for me, and it was pretty funny because even when I was in Movistar Riders, I think that was like 4 years ago, I was doing the things, not not all of them, but some of them that I actually do right now. Of course, now I have a data science team to help me. Back then, I had to do it manually. So when you are an analyst, you actually get to a place where you peak, and it is really difficult to go further. And in data science, in data, I saw like an opportunity to develop that part, if that makes sense, to actually touch other things that people are actually not to. And I found it really, really interesting to actually learn from that. I don't think I learned anything from medicine that I can actually apply into analytics. Maybe that I have to work a lot and study a lot, but nothing else.
That's
Yeah,
pretty beneficial though, I will say.
yeah.
But if we ever have like an OSHA violation on the floor, then we know we call Peppa. All right, Valence. So my question for you is like, as this field of esports analytics continues to grow, how do you stay current with like the latest advancements and techniques in this kind of hyper specialized domain that we have?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. There's to me like the academic side of things, which is you can just Google journal in sports analytics and find 3 to 5 that you can kind of stay up to date on the cutting edge. But to me, I think the more relevant thing is if you chose esports as an industry or you're thinking about it, you're probably choosing it because it's a passion area, not because it's a very well developed way to leverage analytics in this industry. It's not. It's new, right? So to me, I think personally, I learned a lot from just talking with coaching staff, obviously playing myself and coaching myself, and just understanding what questions are they trying to solve, what are they trying to work on week to week, day to day that takes up time, and then see where we can automate to then reduce the time that coaching staff and players are spending on collecting data or collecting information and focus on being creative. They focus on using the data and trying to find insights from it. We want to get them to that point where they're using their brain to be creative and to solution, not from the stuff that takes a long time but isn't necessarily beneficial. Just the process of collecting data and curating it and taking information like here's the last match that the opponent that we're going to be playing this weekend has played, the last 6 matches, the last time they've done X or Y. Here are the lists. You collect that manually if you don't have a data science team, if you don't have a system of HEPAs and BIORAs and the data science team on your team. You just do that, but you just do it manually. So I think to me it's a great way to just understand what you can do in this industry is by just thinking about what solutions and what problems you run into while actually playing whatever esport title it is.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned collecting data, and I believe someone in our chat had been asking, like, how do we get data from CS?
Yeah, this is I love this question because it was a pain in the rear. That's for sure. And I think if you rewind back 2 or 3 years ago, excuse me, I always get sick after traveling. I am Das was fun, by the way. Shout out. Um, I think 2 3 years ago, it was really really difficult to pull data from CS demos. There's this thing called demo files. They're like the replay files of the actual games that were played, whether you practice, it's called scrimmages, or online matches or offline matches. We get these demo files, these replay files back. From that, essentially, you're trying to parse out data, and it comes out in this crazy format called protobuf that Valve created a long time ago. It's not clean at all. It's not a flat file format. It's just a series of network messages. If you in the chat, that just means like, hey, there's this packet being sent or that packet being sent. So a lot of people have spent time since then converting and making APIs to pull data out. Things in like Python, in Golang. There's different languages you can use to actually translate those demo files as inputs, and out comes actual flat files, nice comma separated data files. So I would just Google a big one that I know people use this OPI if you're into Python. It's like the weapon AWPY. It's a Python package, and I would start there.
What do you
Awesome.
get? Just to follow up, what do you actually get as far as data goes? Do you get like per second, multiple per second? Like how often are you getting snapshots?
More data than you would ever want.
Really?
You could get up to 128 times per second per player.
Sheesh.
And in an FPS game, it is kind of nice because you could start to do
Yeah,
things like mechanics and reaction time analysis,
of course.
time to first damage. You know, when two players are looking at each other, enemies
Right.
hopefully, who's shooting each other first, who's basically the time to first damage. That kind of stuff is really important if you're analyzing mechanics in players, and you can't do that unless you have a lot of data points within a second. So most
Do
typically
you
64 or
do you
128
get
ticks.
util usage, like both like where it's used from and where it lands too, or no?
Yeah, I wish people were doing analysis around this when I was a pro player, because my mechanics weren't the best, but my utility usage is where I
Right.
came in strong. So yeah, no, for sure. I think in Counter-Strike terms, how good are your flashbangs? Are
Right.
you are you flashing your teammates more than your enemies? Then that's
Do
probably
you
a bad
get
sign.
like explicit data of who is flash and who is not flash, or do you have to extrapolate from like context, like where it lands?
No, the great thing is because Valve did select this really, alien protobuf language. You can get flags like is blind, so you know when a
Whoa,
teammate
dude,
or an
League
enemy
is
is blind or
so
not.
behind. Oh my god.
That's all you. That's what you got to do next, Mike.
I can't. I mean, I can't do. There's nothing I can do about that.
All right. Well, I do want to ask, like, for the group, if there are any specific internships, programs, entry level positions, that someone who's aspiring to get into esports should consider for practical experience and, building their portfolio. I know myself, like, I come from not esports space in any capacity. And so, it was a big pivot for me. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are also interested in knowing, like, how do you pivot from, a certain industry to esports? Or, if you have a good baseline of experience in analytics, how do you enter into this, kind of competitive field?
It actually depends on what kind of job you want inside of the esports ecosystem, right? If if you wanna be a coach, I don't think you need anything to be a coach. But if you want to be an analyst, um, might be good if you know how to data, for example. If you want to work inside marketing, you should have a marketing degree, etc. Right? Like the ecosystem is gradually being more specific.
Or just drop out, as we
True. True.
as we came to the
which we
conclusion, right?
which we don't advise, actually.
Yeah. Also, just for clarity, I came from music, but I have a pretty extensive background in. I used to work pretty heavily with Java and C++ back in the day, so a lot of my foundation comes from there. I didn't just like randomly be like, oh, I guess I'm just gonna, hop into this company and start coding. Like I've done it before in the past.
What I really love about EG's team and also working with HPE is that I've seen so many people be able to contribute to the esports analytics ecosystem. For example, like my background is in engineering, and maybe I'm a little bit more, numbers savvy or numbers oriented, right? Versus I would never be able to pull out the data visualizations that Mike is able to do. Some of the ideas that I've gotten from him from League of Legends and then being able to apply it to Counter Strike, you're not going to be able to do that, with just working with a group of engineers, right? Traditional engineers, I should say. Same thing with Juan. I mean, recently we looked at how players do over time, performance ratings over time in Counter Strike, and he's given me several different types of outputs that I wouldn't even think about. And I think one of the best ways that we can actually see who's good in this space is to work with a wide number and different types of people and give them a chance. So I think you mentioned like how do you actually get into the industry and if you're interested in analytics earlier. Honestly, you don't have to change what your passion area is too much. If you're more into the art side of things or more into visualizing things, I guarantee you can find teams that are looking for help in that regard. If you're more on the number side of things and computer science and programming, hey, there's ways for you to get involved there as well. So I think like don't have to tailor too much, especially in an emerging industry like esports. You can play to your strengths.
Yeah, there's also like partnerships too. Like you can get the same kind of insights from big partnerships. Like the stuff that we're getting from HPE is huge too. Like even just I don't think there are many teams that have really taken a dive into audio analytics, like comms analytics and stuff. I think this might be, as far as I know, one of the first situations where that's happening. So even just working with them has been huge, just as a perspective shift, or like diving more into draft analysis and stuff has been really nice.
Yeah, I think honestly that's great advice. Like as I touched upon, I didn't come when I started my career thinking I'd end up in esports necessarily, but all of those skills you learn along the way definitely apply in the space, even if they don't seem like they will at the time. So thank you. And I just want to obviously quickly plug, our Genius League. I feel like in terms of like actual industry knowledge and application, that's about as good experience as you can get. So applications unfortunately closed for fall 2023, but everyone should be on the lookout for openings, this fall for spring 2024. All right. Before we get into our next questions, I just want to take a moment to welcome everybody who's joining us and turning into Smart Bytes powered by HPE. We would also like to thank our official data insights partner, HPE, as the series would not be possible without them. So to the group, how does the integration of analytics and data-driven insights impact the overall strategic approach and decision-making process during competitive matches?
You want to start, Soham?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm very curious to hear what all of you have to say here because I learned from all of you in this regard. Honestly, my perspective here is that one of the best ways in FPS games, Counter Strike included, to use data is there comes a point in every single match where you are at a disadvantage and you have to do something interesting or unique to win the round or win the game or whatever it is. That's not a logical problem solving approach. You're at a disadvantage. You might have a worse buy, worse loadout, whatever you want to call it. There comes a point, I guarantee you, in every single game for a Counter Strike where you're at a disadvantage. And when you're in a situation like that, you should use data to figure out what the opponent's weaknesses are. I'm just going to give you an example. Imagine you're playing around on Inferno and you're forcing up, which means you're buying up. The other team has better weaponry, they have better everything essentially. You shouldn't be thinking super logically about where is the best place to actually end up and which bomb site you want to hit. You should use analytics to figure out what's the weak point in general historically for the other team. Is it the B bomb site? Is it the A bomb site? Which are their weak players? Which are the players that probably have worse weapons on their team because you know which are more supportive versus which players are a little bit more star players, right? This is, I think, where HP comes into play because analytics at that scale, we talked about 128 seconds, 128 data points per second per player. You're analyzing a lot of data. We're analyzing thousands of demos, right? Which means each demo file could be up to 30 rounds plus overtime. this is how do you get to those answers when you play against Navi on Inferno, which bomb site is weaker. We're not going to be doing that manually, right? So this is why we need partners like HPE to really help us figure out, how do we crunch those numbers. And that's the perfect use of data in competitive scene is you don't have an answer, logic is out the window. You're just going to have to take a gamble. Let's use data to figure out which gamble to take.
Yeah, that's.
Actually, yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Juan.
Oh, that I was going to say that we don't necessarily use data only to strat and anti-strat, but we can use data in other things. Like for example, in CS:GO, we rely a lot in HLTV for to see how good a player is, if that player has impact, how good is he doing lately. But with the data we have, we can actually, for example, create our own rating system, and that actually helps us to see new players that are entering the CS:GO scene. How good are these players doing in my team? Are they doing better compared to 6 months ago? We have many possibilities with the data we have.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, without like getting, I guess, too into it, I'm curious, Hepa, if there are any like specific examples where you had used analytics and these data tools to identify potential talent or to look at the development of a specific player, on EG.
We are actually developing that tool right now. I cannot say too much about it. Um, our data science team, shout out to Angie and Ivan, are working really hard on these kind of things. We hope to have that prepared and be able to use it this week or as soon as possible. But yeah,
Okay.
I cannot
So
comment
so we'll be
much
on
on
the
it.
lookout then.
Yeah.
Juan is also being a little bit modest here. We've done a lot of sanity checking, and these outputs, we have HLTV rating systems. The folks in the chat, I'm sure you guys are used to that from the CS side. And this is my opinion, I feel like our rating system will be a lot better taking into account things like how good are you at trading, but not only that, but how good are you at trading when enemies are looking at you. It's one thing if you're constantly, trading and the enemies are getting caught off guard by you, but when there's a fair duel, right, similar health, and they're looking at you as well, how often are you coming out on top? HLTV and other rating systems definitely aren't taking that level of detail into account, and I'm pretty excited about where this model is going.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Well, thank you for sharing what little information you could about our strategies here. Viora, I want to kick it over to you. What are some, it's business jargon, but KPIs, key performance indicators, or metrics, that you track to analyze in competitive esports play? And
KPI,
then
KPI,
yeah,
KPI,
KPI,
KPIs. Yeah. I would actually attack this question from a different angle, which is to talk about all the ways that it's dangerous to use some of the more basic KPIs that some teams, maybe not teams, but like that are used on the broadcast. Sometimes like things like KDA that people use, or like even CSM, etc. A lot of that stuff. My job is to make sure that I don't use that unless it has context. Um, like a lot of stats that are useful to a team are not going to be easily like grabbed from raw data. Like a lot of the stuff that's important, which is like how a player is actually performing with resources like versus without resources, and like how teams are setting up for objectives, and all this stuff is not easy to get just by looking at the scoreboard at the end of the game. And the difference between League and CS:GO is we don't get as much data as you guys do, I think. Or I should say, I know you guys are getting way more than League does. We get like 1 frame per second,
Sounds like someone's
basically.
jealous.
I'm a little jealous. I didn't know that you got that much data. I'm a little jealous, I'll be honest with you. There are things that we're still lacking too, but that are potentially in the works, maybe down the line, which is like minion data and being able to track waves, which is pretty huge. But a lot of like what my job is making sure that whatever data I do decide to provide to the team, I am providing the context that goes with it and making sure that it is not just like, hey, this player has, this player got 20 kills in this game. He must be the best. You know what I mean? Like that's the most important thing about my job. And I'm sure there are ways to translate that to CSGO as well. So I'm like, as far as eco goes, right? But
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like communication is something that affects all games, and you have to be good at the highest level to be a good team or a great team. I really have a hard time believing that communication isn't something that every single professional team doesn't look at greatly. So I think like we have an inherent advantage, right? When HP created this comms analyzer tool, what I feel like it can be used for Counter Strike as well. Right now, it's mostly for League. It's it's going to be really cool to be able to say things like in practice, one of our players are talking more than in official game matches. Those kinds of conversations right now have to happen almost like off of memory, right? If a coaching staff wants to sit a player down or in a team discussion, say like, "Hey, I've noticed that you're talking a little bit less in matches." A player can easily say, "No, I think I'm talking the same amount. Like, I don't feel like I played any differently," because pressure and anxiety
and
and just
emotions affect memory.
emotions
Yeah.
affect memory affect,
Yeah.
and it's not because they're trying to be deceptive at all. It's just because that they feel legitimately that they played the way that they do in practice. So any data that we can use, like in this comms analyzer tool, anytime we can use data to say and test our hypotheses and figure out why there's a gap between practice performance and match performance, that's instantly a competitive advantage. And I
Yeah,
think
that's pretty huge.
those are the kinds of tools that we should spend time developing, and that's what we do.
Yeah, the thing is, when you're talking about comms, like that's scalable deep into the future. As long as esports is around, competitive games are going to rely on communication forever. So any time you put into analyzing that sort of information, like, you know, eh, you can bring that game to game. It's not going to change. So it's a pretty big project to work on.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. It sounds like, you're kind of putting the human side into your data analytics, which I think is huge.
I mean, you
But
have to. I mean,
yeah,
just as a side point, like data is telling the story of what happens in these games that are played by people. You know what I mean? It's not just like raw numbers, and they're not just like made by machines, right? It's connected. You can't just take away the context of the fact that people played these games. That's how it works. I don't know. Sorry, I just wanted to say that. You can
oh,
keep
you
going.
have no apologies. No, I mean, my follow-up is like we've obviously talked a lot about collecting data and looking at data sets, but what kind of does the data team do to make real-time adjustments when matches are happening?
So for me, our matches are best of ones usually, although in playoffs, there will be times where like if we're in the middle of a match, I'll provide, some updates to previously relayed data as they change throughout the game series. But I don't know, it might be easier for you to speak on this, Soham, because your matches are more ongoing and there's more feedback between rounds and stuff. So I don't know if it's different for you.
I actually, Juan, I think it'd be really great if you spoke a little bit about when we were prepping for IEM Dallas, right? A match is coming up, a tournament is coming up this weekend. What is your process to actually help understand which data and which kind of match reports you might want to give? Because we have to prioritize, right? We have a lot of data, we have a lot of types of reports we could do. So how do you go about figuring out what the coaching staff or the team needs in that moment against that matchup? Like, what's your process there?
Yeah. So actually, in CS:GO, we don't have yet the visualization tools we actually want to have. We are getting there, but we will get there eventually. So we only have the raw data, and we are actually in the process of getting feedback from all of the coaches to see if the data I'm giving them is actually useful or not. For example, I am Dallas. We actually wanted to give them a report um, that is actually called readability. So this report would actually tell you, for example, a team is going to hit a bomb site, the B bomb site, for example, Inferno. What do they do 25 seconds before hitting that bomb site? Do they throw grenades in this part of the map? This player plays in this position. So trying to connect dots all the time to see if there is a pattern inside the game style of the other team. That would actually be what I want to give teams right now. Simple things that they can actually visualize. We can also give them information like, so here you have a list of how many times they push the B bomb site. You have the timings. You know more or less at what time they hit a bomb site. You know if they actually hit a bomb site in a certain map. There are some maps, like for example, I remember a team, I won't say which team, that would actually hit a bomb site like 5 or 6 times per game. And in other maps, they would actually hit a bomb site maybe one time. So I would try to give right now, because we don't have the visualization tools, we are getting there, we are really close. I would actually try to give them like really clear and simple answers to help them. Makes sense.
Can I just quickly wrap that point up too, because I love this topic, as you can see. The human element that we're talking about and that Mike was talking about earlier too, like how do we bring the human aspect of psychology and communication into analysis here? One thing that Juan's analysis, the readability report as he calls it, helps us is it really helps us confirm the hypothesis that players who are creatures of routine, the creatures of habit, right? In the first 20, 30 seconds of every single round, generally they have the same type of routine, meaning they move around the map in similar ways. They end up in similar spots. We call them settle spots. So my point is that you can understand which players are a little bit more creative versus a little bit less creative, and the ones that are a little bit more predictable, you can figure out if you want to abuse that side of the map or not. And are they readable, right? Are they predictable, readable, whatever you want to call it? So this is again, how the data can connect with the type of player and the type of person really that you are. And unfortunately, of course, our players are also can be readable. So we use these reports to help us understand how do we become less predictable ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a follow-up, which I want to throw back to you, Hepa. And I think someone had thrown this in the chat of, you know, esports analysts, we talk a lot about reviewing raw data and all of that goodness. But how much of your time is spent like visually, reviewing matches to kind of anti-strat players? And I think they put it in the context of like traditional athletes watching film.
Yep. So if I remember correctly, I would actually spend like 1 hour or 1.5 hours per map to anti-strata a certain team. With all the data we have now, for example, the readability project, it would actually take me a lot of time to connect dots between every map and every match. It's something that would actually take me like 6 hours. I would actually have it in 10 minutes with the tools we
Wow.
have. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What about you, Biora? I know we've kind of talked about this before, because that was my misconception, was that all analysts do is sit in their room and watch League of Legends mods.
Oh, I mean, I still do that for scouting reports, but it is less than it used to. I mean, the thing is, when I worked at CLG, I didn't really code as much. When I started working there, Baze wasn't even a thing, so we didn't actually have that data. And by the time I ended, we were just kind of getting the pipeline set up for the data. So I never really worked with it back then. But back then, all my stuff was pretty much manual. I was watching the VODs and taking notes manually and creating presentations off of that all just manually, right? So it took way longer than it should have. When I came to EG and I started, really cracking out Python and really getting into the data and automating a lot of it, I have saved myself not only a significant amount of time on the stuff that I used to do, but I've created new things for myself that I can do, and then save myself time on those things too, because I'm just you keep evolving,
Yeah, you save
right?
time,
So
save yourself more time.
right, you save time so
Exactly.
you can do yeah, exactly. You can
More.
just keep going,
Automate
going, going.
more.
Right. That's kind of how it works though. But the end evolution of that is that you are advancing, sevenfold every time, right? So that's kind of where I'm at now. There are some things that I'm working on automating right now that if I can crack, will be huge. I mean, it'll obviously free myself up for more work in the future, but that's kind of just how it goes, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, that's all.
I've a quick funny story about Mike too. When he so I'm the one who recruited him. I gotta take credit there.
Yeah.
And
Shout out.
not only that, but at the time, I mean, we had several great candidates. Mike was one of them. And I remember our conversation, towards the end of our interview process, and Mike just told me, "Hey, look, so I'm like, one thing you'll get from me is that if I don't know how to do it, I'm gonna go figure it out and work my ass off to make sure that I know how to, whether it's learning better Python, whether it's learning to be more efficient, whether it's to whatever it was." And I think like that kind of go get attitude, I literally have seen from this team and from Mike since that point. And there's something, Mike's not talking about exactly what he's working on right now, and I'm not going to either, but I can tell you, like, those are things that were in our pie in the sky wish list. There were moonshots not so long ago, and Mike is doing it right now, just like Juan is doing these reports that, takes coaches hours and hours and hours, or used to. Most teams it still does because we don't have a Juan, we don't have a Mike, so they don't have them. So super cool, honestly, and great job to both of you. Shout out.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'll like plus 1,000 that. Is a hardworking group of people for sure. But I want to take us kind of back to the human element, which we touched on, right? So for you, Soham, how do you, strike a balance between relying on analytics and then trusting your instincts and the experience of your players, your coaches during these high pressure moments in esports?
You got to go with their instincts first, straight up, because they're here for a reason. They didn't get here because of the data. They got here because of their natural skill and their work ethic and their mentorship, that they've experienced over the years. So first and foremost, you have to figure out what their instincts are and then try to relate that back to, are those instincts currently what's actually other professional teams also using to play? So in determining play styles, in determining how the current game is played, whether it's Counter-Strike or League, there's the meta. And what is the meta is, guess what? It takes, again, coaching staff and players hours and hours and hours of time to analyze. Whereas for us, our goal is to be able to understand when the metas are shifting and try to figure out what the meta is before the larger professional group figures out. A lot of times these meta shifts are happening at the tier 2 and the tier 3 levels that until someone happens to watch a game from one of those teams, it's not, you don't know that perfect, that crazy new smoke grenade or the Molotov that people are throwing, or a new way to take map control. So when something unique happens, when we're looking at it from a data perspective, we can then enhance the instincts of our players and our coaching staff. Here's how to make your job easier, faster. You guys go and be creative from this point onwards. Use your instincts. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, I would also say, in those situations, if you're trying to tell someone that the meta is shifting, they will not believe you unless you have something to back that up. So that is also a place where data comes into play. I mean, I cannot say how many times, coaches I mean, if there are any coaches in this chat right now, I know there was a coach from C9 in the chat earlier. Like, your players will not, if you say X thing is good, they will not always just be like, yeah, sure, okay, I'll do that. They're gonna be like, okay, why? Like, show me why. That's how it works. So, and it's like that in every game. I would be very surprised if it wasn't the same way in CS:GO, the same way in Valorant. Having that data to back it up is a key part of how you even communicate with your players that something is good. So,
And visualizations on top of
yeah,
that, right?
huge,
Mhm.
which is the most important part
Players
too.
are
Yeah.
like, what the hell are you showing
Right,
me?
what am I
This is,
looking at, right?
this is,
Yeah.
actually, what is the meta here? I don't get, so like, I think being able to clip things and being able to point
Right.
it to the last time it happened in an official match, man, I cannot tell you that data without visualization is literally useless. I
It's
think you have to
insanely
be,
useless.
you have to be
Yeah.
organized, and then you
Yeah.
have to figure out how to tell a story with it, and then that's that part of the storytelling is what helps convince and persuades coaching staff and players to actually listen. So it's
100%.
like again, you can get into this industry in many different ways. I guarantee you my storytelling is at an all-time minimum compared to some of the people that I work with that help me with how to actually tell good stories with the data. And without them and without visualizations, you get very you don't get that far at all.
Yeah, I saw someone in the chat ask earlier about AI and computer vision. I just wanted to touch on that because I think
Yeah.
it's important. So I personally don't use AI myself, but that's where our partnership with HPE actually comes in because a lot of the tools they're working with right now do. I don't know if do you use AI in your day to day, Soham, or no?
Yeah, our model for scouting, evaluating players, for example, it's essentially machine learning, and it learns over time and gets retrained over time. So for sure.
Cool. Yeah, sweet. I just wanted to touch on it because I think it is that is where the field is going.
Yeah.
So I think any work that teams or your data team is doing on the game that involves AI or machine learning has the potential. I mean, I don't even know what the potential is at this point. It seems like it's skyrocketing every day. But the stuff that we're doing with HPE when it comes to our relationship analysis and whatever you're doing right now, Soham, with your scouting program, like that stuff is going to exponentially grow as far as how useful it's going to be. I'm very excited about that.
I don't think I don't think it's obvious at all to most people listening how difficult and computationally intensive some of this stuff is for a computer to do, and why you need
Right.
whether you need to work with folks like HPE and the services they provide in order to even analyze something that for a human it might take them 5 seconds, but being able to automate that such that when a computer is watching the game data, the demo of play back, that it can also understand, oh, this is an assertive playstyle. Oh,
Even
this
just
is an
having the
assertive
computing
playstyle.
power, like
Exactly.
where are you going to get the computing power without having a
Trust me,
partnership like that? Like
many
that,
nights.
exactly
Many
that.
nights of laptops being useless otherwise,
Right.
your personal laptop, which
Yeah.
is never fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at right now.
I think someone had asked in the chat something about the players again, so I wanted to kind of steer us back that direction. To HEPA, have you found any instances where player habits actually were supported by data before you had analyzed the data?
That's a really nice question. Um, I don't remember anything like that. Maybe Soham can help me. Do you have an
I, I've
example, Soham?
I have a pretty decent example because we used this a couple of weeks ago. So we were trying to figure out the type of playstyle that works best against teams that in Counter Strike you can give up map control on the counter, it's the CT side, the defense side. So when you give up map control and you just play tucked, you play passive in your sights, what are the play styles or what are the types of attacks you can do that have the highest success rate? So I think things like that are when we have data points such as, okay, just which teams have the most success against that passive team. Okay, then we have a collection of those teams that are finding success. Then you break it down from there. Why are those teams that are playing against this specific team finding success? Then you go deeper into those individual teams where the patterns are. Are there any commonalities? I think this is the type of things that data analysis makes a little bit quicker, because otherwise we're going to have to look at manual demos and videos to figure out which teams and why things are working against specific teams. We just want a head start. We want a head start on like where should we be looking, and I think that's the key part of it. Is what it helps us actually support is where we should look and give us a quicker answer to that, so we're not spending as much time kind of manually figuring out and looking through more things than we need to.
Yeah, thank you. I want to, briefly touch on the future of data in gaming, right? And we kind of talked about AI, um, but to the group, as esports continues to gain mainstream recognition, we're attracting greater investment, greater audience. How do you believe that data analytics will shape, business strategies, sponsorship decisions, and fan experiences? So thinking outside of just what we all consider traditional esports, right? How can organizations leverage data to unlock, new revenue streams and create a better ecosystem for esports?
I'm gonna have to pass this to Juan
Don't
on.
you dare.
Okay.
That's
Listen,
a hard question to answer.
everyone gets so excited to talk
No,
about the video game.
no. It's Juan just helped me with a really critical question to help shape strategy around Counter Strike, and the question is does it make sense for teams to be in North America or in Europe? Like this is not a question we're looking for competitive analysis through demos and things like that, right? This is a business strategy oriented question. So maybe Juan, you can give a couple of insights into kind of like how do you even collect that type of data, and maybe some of the conclusions that you found that once we hear it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, so we were actually interested on um, how different data looks like pre-COVID in 2019, for example, compared to nowadays. So we were actually checking how the CSGO ecosystem has changed through time. And we found some pretty interesting conclusions. Like, for example, if I remember correctly, there are no offline A tier events in North America for CSGO. For example, we are in a point right now that tournaments around the world, we have more tournaments around the world offline than actually in North America. So we actually got a bunch of data. It is quite interesting because you actually know that, okay, NA is losing, let's say it's power in CSGO,
Mm.
but you don't know how bad it is until you actually get that data and visualize it, and you can make really good decisions based on that.
And guess what? Like from a partnerships perspective, like imagine if you can go to a specific partner or potential partner and say, right now is the right time to reinvest in North America. Look at this gap that exists.
Mhm.
Look at how good it was when folks were investing in events and tournaments and just in general watch parties and things like that in North America pre-COVID. Look at this. Look at the data on how good the viewership was, and then right now there's a gap. So if you can help potential partners come to the table with this kind of analysis up front, get there. First of all, they're going to take us more seriously. Second of all, they're going to know that we care about bringing things back to North America to a point where it's going to get better, and here is how. So I think like we're completing the fuller circle. So now they have an easy decision to make. Do they want to help us get there, or do they want to do it themselves, or do they want to wait and see? And at least they're now thinking about it. And I think this is another way that data can be very useful.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's a great answer from both of you. Um, so again, thinking about future of data in gaming, Biora, is there anything that particularly excites you about the space? Be that our wonderful tools from HPE, AI, machine learning, any of that, any potential benefits that really excite you as we look towards the future?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of the stuff that we're working with HPE is scalable. Like it's going to be able to cross multiple. Like it's not just working for League; it's going to be able to work for multiple platforms as well. So as esports evolves, even if we're thinking long term, who knows what the next big game is going to be that comes through the pipeline, right? Um, and so I'm excited for the fact that the stuff that we're working on right now has scalability. It has the potential to be around in the future. That's huge. That means the biggest thing for me in my life is that when I work on anything, I want to make sure that it has value to me. And the way that I know that something like that has value is I know it'll be around. I know that what I'm working on now won't just fizzle out and disappear tomorrow, right? So that's always exciting for me.
Yeah, I want to throw the same question to you, Soham. Anything on the horizon that's really exciting you about data and esports right now?
We call it Counter Strike 2. Pretty exciting thing.
The ultimate meta shift.
It's going to be great. I mean, the data format's going to change. It's going to be a technical challenge, but one that I'm excited to see our team take, and help a little bit myself on the path there. And the greatest thing, again, whether it's HP's tools that are game agnostic, or what are the tools like the readability reports that Juan and Angie and Carrie are working on, Ivan, we try to make it so that we reach a point where even if the Counter-Strike 2 data looks different, we will get it to a point where the format for the data will match CSGO.
Right.
And then from that point onwards, it's just the models
Yeah,
and
that's so
the data
exciting.
inputs, take it from there, right? So I think this is the beauty of thinking up front a little bit of what kind of data format you want things in. And of course, HP is thinking that for making things game agnostic with the comms analyzer, we're thinking about that as well. And hey, new games coming out, we're excited. We're not fearing it coming out. And I think that's the best indication of a good data science and engineering team.
Yeah, wow, thank you. Well, I mean, Hep, I was gonna throw you the same question, but now I feel like you're just gonna tell me CS2.
Yeah, yes.
Anything, I guess, interesting about data and CS2 that you're looking forward to, Hepa?
No, I'm as Soham mentioned, I'm really looking forward to see how we can actually grab data from CS2. That will be like our first objective.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Well, before we let you all go, where can people find you if they want to connect with you? So let's start with you.
At Valens on Twitter, my DMs are open, and I will answer every single question you throw my way. Maybe. Maybe.
Wow, promises, promises.
Comma, maybe.
Yeah. All right, Mike.
I'm gonna be staying up all night messaging him in his
Yeah,
DMs. You say
spam
you're gonna
season.
answer all my questions? Well, guess what? I got some questions. I got some data that I need to look through, and I need help. No, you can find me on Twitter at _Biora. That's all I really use. I don't really stream anymore very much, so yeah, just Twitter. Yeah, there you go, just Twitter.
I love that.
_Biora.
All right, Hepa, where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can also find me at Twitter at Hepasias.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us this evening for the Genius League Smart Bytes powered by HPE panel with EG Soham, Mike, and Juan. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and gained some insights on how we use data in the competitive space. Before we close this panel, I just want to thank HPE again for helping us bring this to life. We're excited to continue this series through 2024, and we look forward to everyone joining us for our next panel. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye. Bye,
Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Thanks, Mel.
Yep.
Yeah.